Hi everybody, this is Dr. Mike Hankins with you. I'm Assistant Professor of Strategy here at the E-School of Graduate PME, and we're just going to talk through a few things here relating to citations and plagiarism. Basically, I want to show you how to do some citations correctly in the correct format, and also some tricks for how to do them in your word processor that will save you some time. And also, we'll talk about what plagiarism is and isn't, and how you can avoid being busted for plagiarism, because that's kind of what we want to avoid and nip that in the bud before we get started. So let's dive right in. I've got kind of a sample little page going here. The first part of this is from an article that I've written, and so you'll notice the second paragraph actually is not something I've written. It's come from this article here. So you'll notice this highlighted text is the same that I have over here. So that's a direct quote. So you notice this is from a article by Mark Clodfelter. He's an air power scholar, and this is actually an assigned reading in the air power course that you'll see this later. But I'm just using this as an example. So let's say you wanted to use this quote in here. First of all, this quote's a little long, so you would want to format it a little differently. But for the purposes of this video, this appears word for word. I literally copied and pasted it. So definitely we need to mark this as a quotation by putting quotation marks around it. There we go. And we need to cite the source using a endnote. So the way you do that in Word, follow my mouse here, you go up to the top, up to References, and there's the Insert Endnote button. There is a keyboard shortcut if you want to memorize that, but you could just click the Insert Endnote, and notice it's given me a little number here and a little number there. So now I'm going to type in the citation. So it's going to be Mark Clodfelter, comma, and then since this is an article, the format is this. We're going to have in quotes the name of the article. So let's make sure we get that right. Scroll up here. The limits of air power or the limits of strategy. So I'll type that in. Make sure I get it right. I'll check it a few times. Or limits of strategy, and then he's got a subtitle, The Air Wars in Vietnam and Their Legacies. Capital line, make sure my capitalization is, whoops. Good. So now we have a comma and in that quotation mark. Now we need the title of the journal in italics. This is Joint Forces Quarterly. I'm going to go italics. Oops. And we need the volume number, which it gives us here is number 78. Sometimes you might need to check the table of contents for something like that. It doesn't always put the volume number in there, but it's usually pretty easy to find. And then in parentheses, we're going to put third quarter 2015 with a comma in between, then a comma after that, and the page number that we got the quote from, which is, we're going to scroll down and make sure we get this right, number 112. So we'll put a 112 right there. So now we're done. So we've got the citation and everything looks correct. That's good to go. Now notice there's a few differences here between how we would do this in a footnote versus if we were doing it as a bibliography. Now usually in the eSchool and the OLMP program, you're not required to provide a bibliography, although sometimes you might be. Just make sure you check with your instructors and read the instructions for the particular assignment. Most of the time you don't need a separate bibliography. If you do, the format is slightly different, and let me show you what that would look like. For starting purposes, let me come up here and we'll have this entry here. So here's what it would look like if it were going to appear in your bibliography. You would need to reverse the order of this, last name, comma, first name, period, and then the title of the article in quotes. You put a period there, Joint Forces Quarterly 78, third quarter 2015, and then here you would put a colon and the page number range for the entire article, which is 111, and we can check here. I don't know how long this article is. I'm not going to bore you by scrolling. You would want to check this. Let's just say it's 10 pages long. I think it's a little more than that, but for the purposes of the illustration, you see what that would look like format-wise. So that's again, notice slight differences just in the formatting there of a bibliography versus a note entry. And so the other thing I'll notice about this, because we've done this through the word processor and it created this little number here automatically, notice if I hover over it, it gives me a little link to there so I can see what's in that endnote. And also notice this. Let's say I come down here and write some more stuff, and I have another endnote there. It automatically creates a number 2, and there's another citation there. Now let's say later in the process you've written your whole paper and you want to go back and do some editing and you realize, well, actually I need this section before the other one. You can do this, cut, paste. I'm doing Control X, Control V there. Notice, look, it reordered those for us, and it reordered them down here as well. So this is a real time saver in Word. So if you're using Word, and if you're not using Word, most word processors have some format of this, or some way of doing this type of functionality. So that's how the endnotes work. You can also go up here if you want to mess around a little bit. You can click on this expansion. Usually we want to change these. These are Roman numerals. We want Arabic numerals most of the time. So I would go up here, select the Arabic numerals, and then hit apply. And look, now we've got regular Arabic numerals instead of the Roman numerals there. And that takes care of that. If for some reason you want to convert to footnotes, you can do that easily as well by coming up here, selecting footnotes, and hit convert. And it'll say convert all endnotes to footnotes, okay. And it'll do that. Or you can go back. So that's easy to go back and forth that way, and you'll notice things kind of changed down there. So that's how you do citations. Now, just in case, because most of the citations you're going to use are going to either be articles. I mean, most of them are articles. Occasionally, you'll be pulling something from a book, and the way you would do formatting for a book is slightly differently. So let's, I don't have a book open on the desk, but let's pretend that this was not an article and that it was a book, a full-length book with this title. The way you would do the citation is the same thing, except article titles will go in quotes, but book titles do not. So we're going to get rid of these quotes. And we're going to put the title, again, assuming this is a book title and not an article title. Book titles go in italics. There won't be a journal title because it's a book and not a journal. We can get rid of that comma. And instead, in the parentheses, you're going to have the city of publication. Let's say it's New York. A lot of publishers publish out of New York. Colon, and then whatever the publisher is. I don't know. I'm making one up because this is a made-up thing. Now, Kansas University Press is not printed out of New York, so that doesn't make sense. But you see the format. You've got city, colon, name of the press, comma, the year that it was published, and then the closed parentheses, and then with the page number. When you're talking about notes, you would have only the page number that you're citing from and not the entire range of the article. So make sure you get that different as well. One other thing you can do, let's say you have some more stuff going on here. And let's say you have a quote there. Let's say you have another quote from him, the same source in a row, and you want to insert your endnote. Instead of typing this all out again, if it's the same citation that went in the last one, you can just do this. Ibid, comma, and then a page number. If it's the same page number, you don't even need that. You can just put ibid. If it's the same article but a different page number, you can do something like that, period. Ibid is a Latin phrase, it's an abbreviation of a Latin phrase that means in the same place. And basically that's a shorthand for you to say the same source that I just cited before. Now what you can also do, let's say in between these, and make sure if you edit and move around, make sure you check your ibids and make sure that they're all correct, because sometimes if you move your paragraphs around, that might reorder something. But let's say in between, you've got a different thing that you're citing, and you're going to insert your endnote, and it's going to be a totally different article, but you've still got this Cloudfilter quote afterwards that you want to do. Now you can't say ibid because the one before it was a different article. But what you can do, since you've already given a full citation for Clodfelter, like the first time you've cited him earlier, when you cite him again, the same source again, you don't need to write it all out the second and subsequent times. You can just put the last name, Clodfelter, and a shortened version of the title. So you could say maybe limits, and then just that, the page number. And anyone reading this would know that somewhere above this, you've got a full citation for it. Now you need to make sure that you have that, of course, but that can all be there. So that's kind of how citations work in Word, in some ways you can deal with them. Now let's get a little bit more details into plagiarism and what it is and how to avoid it, because this is a pretty serious issue, and there's a lot of misconceptions, I think, among some folks about what does and doesn't count as plagiarism. So this, I took this, again, word for word from the article. This is clearly a direct quote. It's word for word. It's verbatim. I literally copied and pasted it in. Now, what some people do is they'll come in here and they might change certain words to synonyms, like maybe instead of demonstrate, you would say show, or kinetic application to, instead of achieve success, maybe win the war, and maybe just change a few words here or there. This does not really count as paraphrasing. Like, paraphrasing is something you can do and should do, I think, as much as possible. I think the more you can put your own words into your papers, the better that your papers will be. So try to reserve the direct quotes for when the original writing is just so perfect that you really can't think of a way to sum it up in your own words. But what I just did, where I subbed out a few words with synonyms, is not what paraphrasing really means. So you might get busted for this. If we see this in a paper and it looks like a direct quote for the most part, but maybe a couple of words have changed, that's not okay. You're going to still need to, you're better off keeping the exact quote and putting it in quotation marks. Because what some people will do is they'll take out these quotation marks and say, and by not having the quotation marks there, what you're saying is, even if there is this citation, the citation is still here, you're citing this source. But what you're saying here is that you wrote these words. And really, you didn't. Or at least in this case, I didn't. If I turned this in and did not have the quotation marks there, that's bad. That's bad for me. Because all I really did was I copied Mark's words and then I subbed out a few synonyms. And that's not my original writing. So I would need to keep that, in the original thing, keep the quotation marks back in, and then I'm safe. Now, let's say I really do want to actually paraphrase this. You need to put some work into reformulating it. What he's getting at here is this, what is the idea he's getting at? He's talking about that the bombing of the Vietnam War reveals the limits of air power. So you could say, according to historian Mark Clodfelter, whoops, make sure I spell his name right. I don't think I did, but let's move on. You could say, I can spell. Good. So you'll notice this sentence kind of sums up this one, but the words are pretty different. I'm not copying any exact phrases at length or anything like that. But it's the same idea. Now, this one, I'm cool to not have quotation marks around it because I did write this, but the idea came from Mark Clodfelter. So I want to still cite him. So I would still want to insert my endnote and have there. Let me make sure I spell his name right. That's not cool of me. So here we've got, that's what you need to do. I'm still citing that, hey, I didn't come up with this idea. This is Clodfelter's idea. And even if I did this, I could delete this and just have this sentence, the bombing efforts in Vietnam War. This is kind of an opinion statement, but this is still I would need to have that citation there, because I didn't come up with this idea on my own. I got this from reading his article, even though these are still my own words. So please understand that distinction. Even if you change, like, paraphrasing means you've really reworked the writing and the wording of something into something very different. The idea is still the same, but the wording is different. If the wording is pretty close to the same and all you've done is change a few words here or there, that's not paraphrasing. So make sure that you understand that distinction. And that's something that I think hangs up a lot of people. Because what you definitely don't want to do is be pulling a lot of quotes from different sources and putting them together and have that be the bulk of your writing. The whole point of our writing assignments is that you're going to be doing some deep analysis. You're going to be taking the ideas from the readings you've done in your courses and kind of building on them, using them as part of your own analysis. So make sure that your papers are mostly consisting of your own analysis and your own ideas, supported by the texts that you're going to read from your class and that you'll cite for your class. It's just important to understand that if you have a quote or near quote, it's got to have quotation marks around it. Even if there's a citation here, if there's no quotation marks, that can still count as plagiarism. So make sure that your paraphrasing is really paraphrasing and not something else. So I hope that answers all the questions that we have about plagiarism and what it is and how to avoid it. So just make sure you use those exact quotes sparingly. Make sure you always cite where you're getting your ideas from, and that when you do paraphrase, you're paraphrasing not just by subbing out words, but by really reformulating the way the words flow and incorporating them into your own voice, but still having a citation for them. So good luck with everything. And if you have any questions, of course, always ask your instructor. If you're ever unsure if you're citing something correctly or incorrectly, ask your instructor. When in doubt, provide a citation. And when in doubt, ask your instructor before you turn it in, just in case. So thank you so much, and good luck with everything.